Great engineers have a passion to improve life, a burning conviction that they can make life better for everyone. Engineers need to have a talent for invention and innovation, but what drives them is the conviction that they can find a better way to do things, a cheaper and more efficient solution to the problems of human existence on this planet of limited resources that we call Earth. Many of us spend a lot of time complaining about the difficulties and problems of life. It is easy to find fault with things that make daily life arduous. For an engineer, these difficulties can be opportunities. How can this be made to work better? How can that process be made more efficient? How can components be made more cheaply, more accurately, and more fit for purpose? Great engineers are convinced that everything can be improved. Instead of complaining, they think of ways to make things better. Since the dawn of civilization, music has always been an indispensable part of children's education. Today, in most countries around the world, music courses are still offered in schools as part of the basic curriculum. The ancient Greeks believed that they should be performed alongside mathematics and physics, as these subjects complement and enhance one another. Researchers at The Ohio State University conducted a retrospective study on the behavior of children. Mainly high school students who had been exposed to music courses in their early years or throughout their school life. The presence of music in adolescent education has a significant impact on their ability to understand complex concepts such as mathematics or physics. Mural projects are an increasingly popular form of public art that transforms outdoor spaces into public art galleries. Our research explored this intersection of public space, public art, and public memory through the Big Wash-Up. Using a technique called reverse graffiti, the project created dozens of outdoor murals. Their focus on local themes and characters celebrated community, identity, heritage, and memory. The process simultaneously honored community memories while creating new shared memories.
The Oakham Area Career Program offers on-site, in-house teaching. The course is taught by experienced instructors, rather than outsourcing it. Our teachers understand each student's individual learning needs, meaning learners receive personalized feedback and support. This way, you'll never miss a class, for any reason. It seems you always forget your reading glasses when you are rushing to work, your coat when you are going to the cleaners, your credit card when you are shopping. Such absent-mindedness may be frustrating to you. Now British and German scientists are developing memory glasses that record everything the user sees. The glasses can play back memories later to help the wearer remember things they have forgotten, such as where they left their keys. And the glasses also allow the user to label items so that information can be used later on. The wearer could walk around an office or a factory identifying certain items by pointing at them. Objects indicated are then given a blank label on a screen inside the glasses that the user then fills in.
Stars and the material between them are almost always found in gigantic, stellar systems called galaxies. Our own galaxy, the Milky Way system, happens to be one of the two largest systems in the local group of 24 or so galaxies. The other is the Andromeda Galaxy. It sketches more than 100,000 light-years from one end to the other, and it is located about 2 million light-years distant from us. The alpine newt is native to much of central continental Europe, and occurs up the coasts of northeast France through to Holland, but it does not appear to have been native to the British Isles. As its name suggests, it can be found in montane habitats up to 2,500 meters in altitude, but it can also be abundant in lowlands, and it will use a variety of water bodies, including both shallow and deep ponds and slow-flowing streams.
When humans began farming some 12,000 years ago, they altered the future of our species forever. Our ancestors were ecological pioneers, discovering and cultivating the most valuable crops, scaling them up to feed entire communities and transforming wild crops so fundamentally that they became dependent on humans for their survival. Farming, in the words of National Geographic's Genographic Project, sowed the seeds for the modern age.
Serving on a jury is normally compulsory for individuals who are qualified for jury service. A jury is intended to be an impartial panel capable of reaching a verdict. There are often procedures and requirements, including a fluent understanding of the language and the opportunity to test jurors' neutrality or otherwise exclude jurors who are perceived as likely to be less than neutral or partial to one side.
From the mid-1890s, a race was on between the merchant navies of the recently unified Germany, Britain, and France. That race was to make the most luxurious and fastest ocean liners, and it started with the Kaiser Wilhelm der Grosse, the first of 14 four-stackers built between 1897 and 1921. The large vessels that followed each tried to outdo the previous one in terms of size and interior design, using many of the most famous of interior designers. Every part of the new ships was designed, from the cutlery to the china, from the furniture to the paneling, and from the bedrooms to the boat decks. Through Kronprinzessin Cecily, Mauretania, Aquitania, Olympic, Titanic, Imperator Vaterland, Isle de France, and Paris, the development and design of the ships grew grander and more luxurious. The process continued into the 1930s, with the Empress of Britain and the fabulously Art Deco Normandy, the finest and most expensive liner ever built, and designed to be a showcase for all that was France, as well as with the Queen Mary, a rather more traditional vessel, but one, nonetheless, which pushed the boundaries of design away from the traditional country house look of the Edwardian era. Each new vessel brought with it the finest of interiors, from the plush and palatial to the modern look of the time. Even today, the influence of these floating palaces can still be seen in vessels such as Cunard's Queen Mary II and the multitude of new cruise vessels, all vying for the public's interest and affection. The large liners were truly floating palaces, and here, William H. Miller brings together a collection of fabulous images of the finest ships ever built, showcasing the style and elegance of a time when getting there was half the fun.
A peaceful environment plays a critical role in fostering a positive and productive atmosphere for education. When learners are surrounded by a supportive environment, they feel safe and secure, which enhances their ability to concentrate on their studies. A lack of distractions and disturbances also ensures that both teachers and students can engage meaningfully in the learning process. Furthermore, a calm and respectful atmosphere among classmates promotes cooperation and mutual support, which are vital for personal development. Thus, achieving a peaceful setting is essential for attaining educational excellence.
Modern technology has brought about significant changes in our daily lives, transforming the way we live, work, and communicate. The advent of the internet and smart devices has made information accessible at our fingertips, empowering individuals with unprecedented access to knowledge. However, this rapid technological progress is not without its challenges. Privacy concerns and the potential for technology to weaken social interactions are issues that require careful consideration. Despite these concerns, innovations in technology continue to provide solutions to global challenges such as climate change and healthcare. As a result, modern technology remains a transformative force shaping our future.
Hancock Building certainly lives up to its name. The title is derived from the Latin word lucere, meaning to shine, and the artwork's 115 lights depict a scale map of the stars that shine in the night sky. The 13-foot artwork contains thousands of glass bulbs, all fed light through blue illuminating fiber optic lines. The sculpture, created by English artist Wolfgang Buttress with the help of astrophysicist Dr. Daniel Bayliss, represents a 3D map of all the stars in the northern hemisphere that are visible with the naked eye. The passage is about the separation of the British Isles from the continent. A continent once bordered with Britain has sunk, but not many people realize that Britain is a relatively recent entity. Scientists have been able to reconstruct this ancient continent with the help of modern technologies. However, no archaeological evidence has ever been found to fully support this claim, leaving the mystery unresolved.
Business etiquette in Australia is relatively straightforward for Americans and Europeans, but it differs greatly to the approach taken in the country's Asian backyard, the source of an increasing proportion of its trade and investment. To many Asians, Australians' openness can appear blunt and unsubtle, their informality confusing and even disrespectful. Even if Australia is less egalitarian than it is less hierarchical than many societies, and first names are almost always used, irrespective of rank.
In the process of studying these techniques, I learned something remarkable, that there's far more potential in our minds than we often give them credit for. I'm not just talking about the fact that it's possible to memorize lots of information using memory techniques. I'm talking about a lesson that is more general and in a way much bigger, that it's possible with training and hard work to teach oneself to do something that might seem really difficult.
Hippocrates allowed observation, rationality, and his own genuine respect for his patients to guide his practice. Using the scientific method, he carefully recorded his patients' symptoms and responses to treatments and used the data gathered to evaluate and prescribe the most successful regimens. His prestige as a great medical practitioner, educator, and author helped spread these ideals of rational medicine throughout the ancient world. Some of the most basic organisms are smarter than we thought. Rather than moving about randomly, amoebas and plankton employ sophisticated strategies to look for food and might travel in a way that optimizes their foraging. Immediately after an amoeba turned right, it was twice as likely to turn left as right again, and vice versa, they told a meeting of the American Physical Society meeting in Denver, Colorado last week. This suggests that the cells have a rudimentary memory, being able to remember the last direction they had just turned in.
Sports were firstly part of survival skills, tightly linked to human existence, but now they are mainly for recreational purposes and enjoyment. For example, swimming, hunting, and fishing were originally necessary for food, but today they have evolved into popular competitive sports. Some of them are actually seen as global competitions, attracting millions of spectators.
Universities have always been connected with political societies, and in many countries the student union provides a forum for debate and for discussion. The accommodation in which students want to live in is one that reflects their ideals. There is so much opportunity in university for students to pursue their interests.
Paris is very old. There has been a settlement there for at least 6,000 years, and its shape has been determined in part by the river Seine and in part by the edicts of France's rulers. But the great boulevards we admire today are relatively new and were constructed to prevent any more barricades being created by the rebellious population. That work was carried out in the middle 19th century. The earlier Paris had been in part a maze of narrow streets and alleyways. But you can imagine that the work was not only highly expensive, but caused great distress among the 500,000 or so whose houses were simply razed and whose neighborhoods disappeared. What is done cannot usually be undone, especially when buildings are torn down. Is it a glimpse of a dystopian future or just a common-sense approach to technology? Either way, Gatwick Airport's newest hotel offers something different, a vision of a post-employee economy where tasks are automated by a computer. At Block, a hotel of 245 rooms, there are just 2 members of staff on duty. Despite its unglamorous location in a renovated office block above the airport's south terminal, Block has grand plans to shake up the hotel industry. Thanks to a partnership with Korean technology giant Samsung, almost everything here can be controlled by smartphone. Once guests have made a reservation online, they are given a code that can be used to log into an app, enabling them to check in without standing at a reception desk. In the room, the phone can operate the air conditioning, switch on lights, turn on TVs, and open blackout blinds. Even keys have been rendered obsolete. Guests can unlock the door to their room using their phone, with something called near-field communication technology. At the end of their stay, checkout is also done via the app, meaning that guests can complete their entire stay without speaking a single word to a member of staff. Team Lab's digital mural at the entrance to Tokyo's Skytree, one of the world's monster skyscrapers, is 40 meters long and immensely detailed. But however massive this form of digital art becomes, and it's a form subject to rampant inflation, Inoko's theories about seeing are based on more modest and often pre-digital sources. An early devotee of comic books and cartoons, no surprises there. Then computer games, he recognized when he started to look at traditional Japanese art that all those forms had something in common, something about the way they captured space. In his discipline of physics, Inoko had been taught that photographic lenses, along with the conventions of Western art, were the logical way of transforming 3 dimensions into 2, conveying the real world onto a flat surface. But Japanese traditions employed a different spatial logic. As he said in an interview last year with J. Collab.org, that is uniquely Japanese. We believe anyone can excel with the right foundation. By understanding the basis of information setting for knowledge, such as coding and other skills, participants gain essential expertise. Through 912 projects, you will build your portfolio, and upon completing the program, you will have a robust showcase of your abilities.
While many businesses struggle to adapt in today's competitive market, only a few have managed to truly thrive. Those that succeed often work alongside innovative partners who help facilitate growth through collaboration and shared resources. Thriving in such environments requires not only resilience but also the ability to adapt and work effectively alongside others.
This museum restaurant is a perfect place to have a party. You can have a party of 20-25 people. More people are possible, and prices start at $45.
Make sure your shipping envelopes are clean and dry, and remember to remove any paper shipping labels prior to dropping off. Paper labels are detrimental to the store drop-off recycling process. If the labels don't peel off easily, you can cut them off with scissors. I feel about the opportunity to take on new challenges and contribute to the team. While I was working at my previous job, I gained valuable experience that I believe will be beneficial in this role. I am eager to take a position at your esteemed company, and I am confident that my skills and experience make me a strong candidate. Please let me know if there are any additional steps I need to take or information I need to provide. I am looking forward to your response. The Kuipers Library is a research library in Amsterdam's famous Rijksmuseum. It is the oldest and largest of its kind in the country and aesthetically astounding. However, despite the streams of tourists that flow through the museum, far too few seem to trickle into its remarkable reading room. The 19th century library, which has recently been restored, has been collecting content since 1885. Its shelves are stocked with manuscripts bound to entice any art history lover. While browsing its extensive collection, you'll come across books, journals, and periodicals, as well as catalogs about art auctions, exhibitions, trades, and collections. Following its renovations, the museum opened the library's reading room to visitors. Tourists, students, and art historians alike are welcome to delve into its rich collection. Tables on the ground floor allow people to hunker down with their research materials, surrounded by the library's aesthetically astounding walls of books. The pandemic created an urgent situation prompting unprecedented contribution to bolster the health system, reform the pharmaceutical sector, and distribute relief throughout the country. Employees should adhere to regulations that define conditions of the working environment to ensure a safe and healthy workplace. These measures are intended to minimize hazards in the workplace. In some countries, companies are required to purchase insurance to protect employees' rights and interests.
Stress, that tense feeling often connected to have too much to do, too many bills to pay, and not enough time or money is a common emotion that knows few borders. About three-fourths of people in the US, Australia, Canada, France, Germany, and Italy say they experience stress on a daily basis, according to polling. The anxious feelings are even more intense during the holidays. Germans feel stress more intensely than those in other countries polled. People in the US cited financial pressure as the top worry. Memories can become scrambled, sometimes in the process of attempting to retrieve something. You might relate a story to a friend, but unwittingly include some mistaken details. Later, as you attempt to recall the episode, you might come across your memory of the scrambled recall attempt instead of your original memory. Memory is malleable. It is not, as commonly thought, like a museum piece sitting in a display case.
Children who eat breakfast regularly consume more nutrients that are essential for healthy development. As a result, they are more likely to thrive both physically and mentally. Studies also show that such children tend to behave better in school and maintain higher levels of concentration. Whether you want to exercise and stay fit, train professionally with like-minded people, or indulge your competitive streak, Trinity Sport and Fitness has it covered. We've got a dedicated support development team on campus to support every student taking part in sports. You might want to participate in sports competitions, volunteer with a local sports class, or simply play for fun with our social sport program. Trinity Fitness members of our public-facing sports facility will also entitle you to discounts when you are booking a sports facility and fitness class. You will also get an opportunity to benefit from tailored personal training, free activities, events, and lots more.
The increasing darkness in the northern hemisphere this time of year indicates to the plant that autumn is coming on, so it starts recouping materials from the leaves before they drop off. Evergreens protect their needle-like foliage from freezing with waxy coatings and natural antifreeze. But broadleaf plants like sugar maples, birches, and sumacs have no such protections. As a result, they shed their leaves, but before they do, the plants first try to salvage important nutrients, such as nitrogen and phosphorus.
Complementary therapies such as those practiced by naturopaths, chiropractors, and acupuncturists have become increasingly popular in Australia over the last few decades. Interest initially coincided with enthusiasm for alternative lifestyles, while immigration and increased contact and trade with China have also had an influence. The status of complementary therapies is being revisited in a number of areas: legal regulation, the stances of doctors' associations, their inclusion in medical education, and scientific research into their efficacy.
Trees, as ever, are or should be at the heart of all discussions on climate change. The changes in carbon dioxide, in temperature, and in patterns of rainfall will each affect them in many ways, and each parameter interacts with all the others, so between them, these three main variables present a bewildering range of possibilities.
The closing decades of an artist's life do not generally make the biographer's heart beat faster, but Claude Monet is one of a handful of painters who bucks the pattern of an irrelevant old age. While it's true that by the time he was 73 he had accumulated all the usual dragging baggage, outhouses full of fancy cars, a taste for expensive wine, and a sprawl of dependence, it was also now that he produced career-defining work.
Research is a process of investigation leading to new insights effectively shared and is central to the purpose of any university. Students have the right to be taught by acknowledged experts in their field, which requires that staff members operate at the most advanced level appropriate to their discipline and level. Research is, therefore, crucial to a positive student experience from further education to doctoral development. Researchers suggest the following tips as you begin to network: seek common ground, engage with your network regularly and consistently, apply yourself to making your network work or it will wither. It is a skill that you need to practice, not a talent. With the increase in women's participation in the labor force, many mothers have less time available to undertake domestic activities. At the same time, there has been increasing recognition that the father's relationship with a child is important. A father can have many roles in the family, ranging from income provider to teacher, carer, and playmate. Therefore, balancing paid work and family responsibilities can be an important issue for both fathers and mothers in families. At the end of the last ice age, the melting ice disrupted the ocean currents in the North Atlantic and caused a drop in temperature of almost 5 degrees. Even though the rest of the planet was warming up, the North Atlantic region remained in a cold period for 1,300 years. The same thing happened around 8,000 years ago when the cooling lasted about 100 years, and it could happen again today. Even a short period of cooling in the North Atlantic could have a dramatic effect on the wildlife and the human populations living there.
Electric eels are born to shock. Thanks to cells called electrocytes, which, stacked like batteries, make up 80% of their bodies, these cunning South American hunters can deliver debilitating blows of up to 600 volts to their prey, but they've harnessed their electricity to pack even bigger punches. Last year, Vanderbilt University biologist Kenneth Catania revealed electric eels bring their positively charged head and negatively charged tail closer together to generate a more powerful current.
Having tracked down research that is relevant to your area of interest, the next task is to actually make sense of that research. This section is intended to show you how to be critical of the research you are reviewing and how to check that the evidence is credible and represented appropriately. Unfortunately, this means discussing the ways in which research findings may be misrepresented.
A graphic introduction was put together by Northern artists who have interpreted discussions with scientists from the SuperGen Bioenergy Hub in a series of striking images which imagine alternative futures and explain some of the technology involved and how it might be put into practice.
The way we design our cities needs a serious rethink. After thousands of years of progress in urban development, we plateaued some 60 years ago. Cities are not safer, healthier, more efficient, or more equitable. They are getting worse on these measures. The statistics on chronic disease, rising road tolls, and congestion in our urban environments paint a bleak future. The clues to why lie in how we think about and design our cities. The theme of contrast evident in Blue Skies is typical of Ms. Vu's work. She explores organic structures using the newest technologies. She is inspired by minute detail, but often works on a large scale. Her sculptures are ambiguous, yet familiar, blurring the boundaries between the real and the artificial. Organic structures and spirals are the starting point for my creative exploration, but my work extends these concepts to explore the overlap between the real and the artificial, and how we often don't differentiate between the two, Ms. Vu said. Mercury is not found in many common products that we buy because it can be very dangerous. The most common products that contain mercury are batteries, powerful outdoor lights, disinfectants, and thermometers, which are used to measure our body's temperature. It can also be found in barometers, which are used to measure air pressure and show changes in weather, and thermostats, which regulate the temperature of buildings. Mercury can also be found in printer and photocopy toners.
The wristwatch works by tracking information such as a person's pulse or movement. When it detects a change in a person's health, the watch sends information to a touchscreen hub located in the home. The hub then alerts predetermined contacts and calls for help immediately.
For lots of first-year students, the university may be their first experience living away from home for an extended period. It is a definite break from home. In my point of view, this is the best thing that you can do. I know you have to fend for yourself, cook and clean after yourself, basically look after yourself without your parents, but the truth is sometime in your life you are going to have to part with lovely mummy and daddy. But they are only just a phone call away, and it is really good to have some quality time without them. The first few weeks can be a lonely period. There may be concerns about forming the friendship. When new students look around, it may seem that everyone else is self-confident and socially successful. The reality is that everyone has the same concerns. Increased personal freedom can feel both wonderful and frightening. Students can come and go as they choose with no one to hassle them. The strange environment with new kinds of procedures and new people can create the sense of being on an emotional roller coaster. This is normal and to be expected. You meet so many more people in the halls than if you stayed at home. The main points about living away from home are no parents. You don't have to tell them where you're going, who you're going with, what time you'll be coming, why you're going, etc. You learn various social skills. You have to get along with your roommates. Living with them can present special, sometimes intense, problems. Negotiating respect of personal property, personal space, sleep, and relaxation needs can be a complex task. The complexity increases when roommates are of different backgrounds with very different values.
The tomato is probably the most widely grown vegetable by the home gardener because of its food value, many uses, and relative ease of culture. Originating in Central and South America, the tomato was domesticated in Mexico. There are many related wild species in South America. Tomati was the name used by Native Americans.
With about 1.5 billion non-native speakers, English has become the world's own language. Such dominance has its downside, of course. There are now about 6,800 languages left in the world compared with perhaps twice that number back at the dawn of agriculture. Thanks in part to the rise of Uber languages, most importantly English, the remaining languages are now dying at the rate of about one a fortnight. Want to learn Busu, anyone? Then you'd better head to Cameroon fast, before one of the language's last 8 speakers kicks the bucket, as the Busunese presumably doesn't say.
Green spaces contribute significantly to a reduction of soil and aerial temperatures during spells of hot weather, so contributing to human well-being. In the garden context, there is, however, little information as to what extent various types of plants differ in their cooling potential and how certain planting combinations may maximize cooling under a scenario of low rainfall and minimal water inputs. Mischel is the creator of the marshmallow test, one of the most famous experiments in the history of psychology, which is often cited as evidence of the importance of self-control. In the original test, which was administered at the Bing Nursery School at Stanford in the 1960s, Mischel's team would present a child with a treat. Marshmallows were just one option, and tell her that she could either eat the one treat immediately or wait alone in the room for several minutes until the researcher returned, at which point she could have 2 treats. The promised treats were always visible, and the child knew that all she had to do to stop the agonizing wait was ring a bell to call the experimenter back, although in that case, she wouldn't get the second treat. The longer a child delayed gratification, Mischel found that the longer she was able to wait, the better she would fare later in life at numerous measures of what we now call executive function. She would perform better academically, earn more money, and be healthier and happier. She would also be more likely to avoid a number of negative outcomes, including jail time, obesity, and drug use. Keith Haring began as an underground artist, literally. His first famous projects were pieces of stylized graffiti drawn in New York subway stations. Haring traveled from station to station, drawing with chalk and chatting with commuters about his work. These doodles helped him develop his classic style, and he grew so prolific, doing up to 40 drawings a day, that it was not long before fame and a measure of fortune followed. Soon, galleries and collectors from the art establishment wanted to buy full-sized pieces by Haring. The paintings skyrocketed in price, but this did not sit well with Haring's philosophy. He believed that art, or at least his art, was for everyone. Soon, Haring opened a store which he called the Pop Shop, which he hoped would attract a broad range of people. While somewhat controversial among street artists, some of whom accused Herring of selling out, the pop shop changed the way people thought about the relationship between art and business.
Egg-eating snakes are a small group of snakes whose diet consists only of eggs. Some eat only small eggs which they have to swallow whole as the snake has no teeth. Instead, some other snakes eat bigger eggs, but it requires special treatment. These snakes have spines that stick out from the backbone. The spines crack the egg open as it passes through the throat.
A new report by environmental nonprofit The Nature Conservancy lays out how trees could pave the way to cleaner air and cooler cities. Using geospatial information on forest cover paired with air pollution data and population forecasts for 245 cities, researchers found that trees have the biggest health payoffs in densely populated, polluted cities like Delhi, Karachi, and Dhaka. The Conservancy and the C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group presented the findings of their global survey this week at the American Public Health Association meeting in Denver, Colorado.
The speed of sound, otherwise known as Mach 1, varies with temperature. At sea level on a standard day, the temperature is 59 F, and Mach 1 is approximately 761 mph. As the altitude increases, the temperature and speed of sound both decrease until about 36,000 feet, after which the temperature remains steady until about 60,000 feet. Within that 36,000–60,000 foot range, Mach 1 is about 661 mph. Because of the variation, it is possible for an airplane flying supersonic at high altitude to be slower than a subsonic flight at sea level. The transonic band, the sound barrier, extends from around Mach 0.8 when the first supersonic shock waves form on the wing to Mach 1.2 when the entire wing has gone supersonic. High emotional intelligence can help a manager improve workplace communication skills, employee motivation, and organizational effectiveness. If a manager has high empathy, key component of emotional intelligence, he or she will be able to listen to the concerns of employees and will be more understanding of their needs, wants, and concerns. This will most likely translate into increased motivation and satisfaction of employees and ultimately will have a positive effect on the effectiveness of the business.
Of the more than 1,000 bat species worldwide, 22 are native to North America. And while there are no pollinator bats in our area, gardeners should champion those that do live here because they're insectivorous. These bats consume moths, beetles, and mosquitoes and can eat up to 500 mosquito-sized insects per hour. They also protect gardens and crops from such pests as cucumber beetles, cutworms, and leafhoppers.
Dance has played an important role in many musicals. In some cases, dance numbers are included as an excuse to add to the color and spectacle of the show, but dance is more effective when it forms an integral part of the plot. An early example is Richard Rodgers' On Your Toes, 1936, in which the story about classical ballet meeting the world of jazz enabled dance to be introduced in a way that enhances rather than interrupts the drama. In The Origin of Species, Darwin provided abundant evidence that life on Earth has evolved over time, and he proposed natural selection as the primary mechanism for that change. He observed that individuals differ in their inherited traits and that selection acts on such differences, leading to evolutionary change. Although Darwin realized that variation in heritable traits is a prerequisite for evolution, he did not know precisely how organisms pass heritable traits to their offspring. Just a few years after Darwin published The Origin of Species, Gregor Mendel wrote a groundbreaking paper on inheritance in pea plants. In that paper, Mendel proposed a model of inheritance in which organisms transmit discrete heritable units, now called genes, to their offspring. Although Darwin did not know about genes, Mendel's paper set the stage for understanding the genetic differences on which evolution is based.
Although Botswana is rich in diamonds, it has high unemployment and stratified socioeconomic classes. In 1999, the nation suffered its first budget deficit in 16 years because of a slump in the international diamond market. Yet Botswana remains one of the wealthiest and most stable countries on the African continent.
We now know through the work of neuroscientists that the human brain is wired to mimic other people, and this mimicry involves actual involuntary physiological experience in the observer. Human beings tend to imitate actions that they see. Physiologically, our brains include mirror neurons which react to actions that are seen as if we are doing the action ourselves. It is largely an unconscious and automatic experience. When we hear people speak, observe their vocal nuances, watch their posture, gestures, and facial expressions, etc. Neural networks in our brains are stimulated by the shared representations, generating feelings within us that reflect the experience of those we are observing.
The classic era of Mayan civilization came to an end around 900 AD. Why this happened is unclear. The cities were probably overfarming the land, so that a period of drought led to famine. Recent geological research supports this, as there appears to have been a 200-year drought around this time. Performance appraisals have traditionally been considered the best way to evaluate an employee's performance, but increasingly organizations are finding them of little value. Employees find them stressful and unhelpful. Importantly, they also take up a lot of time. When Deloitte analyzed their own process, they found managers and employees spent around 2 million hours a year on performance reviews. A growing number of companies have decided to abolish performance reviews altogether, instead introducing more regular catch-ups.
Over 800 Shakespeare scholars from almost 50 countries will gather at King's College London next week as the university co-hosts the 10th World Shakespeare Congress to explore and honour the bard's life and work. Organised by the International Shakespeare Association, ISA, the World Congress is held every 5 years, and 2016 is the first time it will be co-hosted in 2 locations that were integral to both the personal and working life of William Shakespeare. Delegates will arrive in London on Thursday following the start of the Congress on Sunday in Stratford-upon-Avon. With a main theme of creating and recreating Shakespeare, the Congress will look at the continuing global relevance of Shakespeare's work through a varied programme of plenaries, panels, seminars, and workshops. Music is an important part of our lives. We connect and interact with it daily and use it as a way of projecting our self-identities to the people around us. The music we enjoy, whether it's country or classical, rock and roll or rap, reflects who we are. But where did music at its core first come from? It's a puzzling question that may not have a definitive answer. 1. Leading researcher, however, has proposed that the key to understanding the origin of music is nestled snugly in the loving bond between mother and child. In a lecture at the University of Melbourne, Richard Parncutt, an Australian-born professor of systematic musicology, endorsed the idea that music originally spawned from motherese, the playful voices mothers adopt when speaking to infants and toddlers. As the theory goes, an increased human brain size caused by evolutionary changes occurring between 1 and 2 million years ago resulted in earlier births, more fragile infants, and a critical need for stronger relationships between mothers and their newborn babies. According to Pankut, who is based at the University of Graz in Austria, motherese arose as a way to strengthen this maternal bond and to help ensure an infant's survival.
Higher education qualifications provide a substantial advantage in the labor market. Higher education graduates are less likely to be unemployed and tend to have higher incomes than those without such qualifications. Having a highly educated workforce can also lead to increased productivity and innovation and make Australia more competitive in the global market.
Civics and citizenship education builds students' knowledge and understanding of the ways in which citizens can actively participate in Australia's diverse and inclusive society. Students learn about the civic institutions and the processes through which decisions are made for the common good of the community, and they also develop the skills and understandings that relate to the organisation of a harmonious democratic society.
Research has suggested that major stresses in our lives are life changes, for example, moving house, marriage, or relationship breakdown. Work-related factors, including unemployment and boredom, are also common causes of stress. Differences in personality may also play a part. Let us then suppose the mind to be, as we say, white paper, void of all characters, without any ideas. How comes it to be furnished? Whence comes it? By that vast store which the busy and boundless fancy of man has painted on it with an almost endless variety. Whence has it all the materials of reason and knowledge? To this I answer in one word: from experience, in that all our knowledge is founded, and from that it ultimately derives itself. Cuteness in offspring is a potent protective mechanism that ensures survival for otherwise completely dependent infants. Previous research has linked cuteness to early ethological ideas of a Kindchen schema, infant schema, where infant facial features serve as innate releasing mechanisms for instinctual caregiving behaviors. We propose extending the concept of cuteness beyond visual features to include positive infant sounds and smells. Evidence from behavioral and neuroimaging studies links this extended concept of cuteness to simple instinctual behaviors and to caregiving, protection, and complex emotions. We review how cuteness supports key parental capacities by igniting fast, privileged neural activity followed by slower processing in large brain networks also involved in play, empathy, and perhaps even higher-order moral emotions.
Over the past 2 decades, around a third of the world's mangrove swamps have been converted for human use, with many turned into valuable shrimp farms. In 2007, an economic study of such shrimp farms in Thailand showed that the commercial profits per hectare were $9,632. If that were the only factor, conversion would seem an excellent idea. However, proper accounting shows that for each hectare, government subsidies formed $8,412 of this figure, and there were costs, too: $1,000 for pollution and $12,392 for losses to ecosystem services. These comprised damage to the supply of foods and medicines that people had taken from the forest, the loss of habitats for fish, and less buffering against storms. And because a given shrimp farm only stays productive for 3 or 4 years, there was the additional cost of restoring them afterwards.
Seminars are not designed to be mini lectures. Their educational role is to provide an opportunity for you to discuss interesting and/or difficult aspects of the course. This is founded on the assumption that it is only by actively trying to use the knowledge that you have acquired from lectures and texts that you can achieve an adequate understanding of the subject. If you do not understand a point, it is highly Unlikely that you will be the only person in the group in that position. You will invariably be undertaking a service for the entire group if you come to the seminar equipped with questions on matters which you feel you did not fully understand. The seminar is to provoke discussion.
Music was as important to the ancient Egyptians as it is in our modern society, although it is thought that music played a role throughout the history of Egypt. Those that study the Egyptian writings have discovered that music seemed to become more important in what is called the Pharaonic period of their history. This was the time when the Egyptian dynasties of the pharaohs were established, around 3100 BCE, and music was found in many parts of everyday Egyptian life. Over the last 10,000 years, there seem to have been two separate and conflicting building sentiments throughout the history of towns and cities. One is the desire to start again, for a variety of reasons. An earthquake or a tidal wave may have demolished the settlement, or fire destroyed it, or the new city marks a new political beginning. The other can be likened to the effect of a magnet. Established settlements attract people who tend to come whether or not there is any planning for their arrival. The clash between these two sentiments is evident in every established city, unless its development has been almost completely accidental or is lost in history. Incidentally, many settlements have been planned from the beginning, but for a variety of reasons, no settlement followed the plan. A good example is Curwen, on the Clyde River in New South Wales, which was surveyed in the second half of the 19th century, in expectation that people would come to establish agriculture and a small port. But no one came. Most country towns in New South Wales started with an original survey whose grid lines are still there today in the pattern of the original streets. You have about 30 minutes to answer each question. You must take account of how many marks are available for each part when you answer it. Even if you think you can write more, don't spend 15 minutes answering a part worth only 5 marks. Leave space at the end of your answer and come back to it if you have time to spare later. And if you can't think of an answer to some part, leave a space and move on to the next part. Don't write about something else if you don't know the correct answer. This is just a waste of your valuable time and the examiner's.
Active Learning Classrooms, ALCs, are student-centered, technology-rich classrooms. They are easily identified with their large, circular tables and movable seating designed to improve student engagement in class. Typically, each table is accompanied by a whiteboard and flat-screen monitor to display student work, and larger rooms frequently have miniature bulb and microphones at each table. In this way, students are able to signal if they have questions or want to speak to the entire room.
A surprising number of writers, even those who have thought of their writing as self-expression, have sought a freedom from the tyranny of subjectivity, echoing Goethe's claim that every healthy effort is directed from the inward to the outward world. From time to time, others have risen to defend commitment, engagement, and involvement. But at least until recently, the predominant demand in this century has been for some sort of objectivity. Ponzi is infamous. His original scheme was based on the legitimate arbitrage of international reply coupons for postage stamps, but he soon began diverting new investors' money to make payments to earlier investors as interest. Giant exoplanets, like the so-called hot Jupiters that are similar in characteristics to the solar system's biggest, planet and orbit very close to their host stars are excellent targets for astronomers in their search for their extrasolar worlds. The size and proximity of these planets is easy to detect as they create a large decrease in brightness when passing in front of their parent stars.
To qualify as a conservancy, a committee must define the conservancy's boundary, elect a representative conservancy committee, negotiate a legal constitution, prove the committee's ability to manage funds and produce an acceptable plan for equitable distribution of wildlife-related benefits. Once approved, registered conservancies acquire the rights to a sustainable wildlife quota set by the ministry. John Milton wrote in a wide range of genres, in several languages and on an extraordinary range of subjects. His was a more general education than is offered at Cambridge these days, and it continued after his 7 years here, equipping him with the tools to write some of the most groundbreaking literature ever seen, and to engage as a polemicist on many different social, political, and theological questions. The ruins of the South Fremantle Power Station have stood empty since 1985, home only to urban explorers and street artists. Opened in 1951, the power station was once a pillar of progress for the expanding energy demands of Perth. Here it stood proud and strong for 34 years, supplying energy to its surrounding metropolis until 1985, when it was deemed to no longer be worth the money. The doors were shuttered, and the plant's 4 tall chimney stacks were demolished, leaving the rest of the plant to rot by the sea.
The transitions which occurred in Britain around 100 BC and after 43 AD, when the Roman army invaded Britain, represent the key points of socioeconomic trend in Britain's past. During the 1st century BC, the traditional communal form of life shifted rapidly to a world where certain individuals become more important. During the 1st century AD, Britain became fully a part of the Roman Empire.
The electrons that orbit closest to the nucleus are strongly attracted. They are called bound electrons. The electrons that are farther away from the pull of the nucleus can be forced out of their orbits. These are called free electrons. Free electrons can move from one atom to another. This movement is known as electron flow. Electricity is the movement or flow of electrons from one atom to another.
One of the most popular forms of theatre is musical. Combining drama, dance and music, the musical has been around for over a century, and in that time has kept pace with changing tastes and social conditions, as well as advances in theatre technology. Many modern musicals are known for their spectacular sets, lighting and other effects.
London's National Portrait Gallery is currently celebrating the 50-year career of photographer Sandra Lausada. The 21 portraits on display depict key figures in literature, film, and fashion from the early 1960s. Subsequent to the acquisition of 40 portraits by Lausada, the display at the National Portrait Gallery highlights shots taken between 1960 and 1964, many of which feature in Lausada's book Public Faces, Private Places, 2008. Formal commissioned portraits are shown alongside behind the scenes, photographs taken on film sets, and unguarded portraits of sitters captured at home.
Many people today think of culture in the way that it was thought of in Europe during the 18th and early 19th centuries. This concept of culture reflected inequalities within European societies and their colonies around the world. This understanding of culture equates culture with civilization and contrasts both with nature or non-civilization. According to this understanding of culture, some countries are more civilized than others, and some people are more cultured than others. Anything that doesn't fit into this category is labeled as chaos or anarchy. From this perspective, culture is closely tied to cultivation, which is the progressive refinement of human behavior. In practice, culture referred to elite goods and activities such as haute cuisine, high fashion or haute couture, museum caliber art, and classical music. The word cultured referred to people who knew about and took part in these activities. For example, someone who used culture in this sense might argue that classical music is more refined than music by working-class people, such as jazz or the indigenous music traditions of Aboriginal peoples.
Genius, in the popular conception, is inextricably tied up with precocity. Doing something truly creative, we're inclined to think, requires the freshness and exuberance and energy of youth. Orson Welles made his masterpiece, Citizen Kane, at 25. Herman Melville wrote a book a year, through his late 20s, culminating at age 32 with Moby Dick. Mozart wrote his breakthrough piano concerto No. 9 in E-flat major at the age of 21. In some creative forms like lyric poetry, the importance of precocity has hardened into an iron law. How old was T.S. Eliot when he wrote the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock? I grow old, 23. Poets peak young, the creativity researcher James Kaufman maintains. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the author of Flow, agrees. The most creative lyric verse is believed to be that written by the young. According to the Harvard psychologist Howard Gardner, a leading authority on creativity, lyric poetry is a domain where talent is discovered early, burns brightly, and then peters out at an early age. Critical thinking involves looking at something you may have seen many times and examining it from many different angles and perspectives. It involves going beyond the obvious or beyond easy to seek new understanding and rare solutions. It involves looking at common issues with uncommon eyes, known problems with new skepticism, everyday conflicts with probing curiosity, and daily challenges with greater attention to detail.
Children who skip school are increasingly on family holidays, government figures revealed today. Fewer children played truant this spring term compared with the spring term last year. Children missed 3M unauthorized days of school last term, compared with 3.7M days of school in the same period last year. But a hardcore group of truants, 6% of the school population, who account for more than 3/4 of all those on unauthorized absence, are more likely to be on a family holiday than they were in the same period last year. Some 1.2% of all absence was for family holidays not agreed by their school last term, compared with 0.9% for the same term last year. More than 60% of all absences were for illness, the same figure as last year.
Coffee is enjoyed by millions of people every day, and the coffee experience has become a staple of our modern life and culture. While the current body of research related to the effects of coffee consumption on human health has been contradictory, a study in the June issue of Comprehensive Reviews in Food Science and Food Safety, which is published by the Institute of Food Technologists (IFT), found that the potential benefits of moderate coffee drinking outweigh the risks in adult consumers for the majority of major health outcomes considered.
All kinds of predictions may be about to get even more difficult, thanks to climate change. Though no one is sure exactly what its effects will be, it seems that extreme weather conditions such as storms and hurricanes are likely to become more common. Such events have far-reaching effects on distant weather systems, making general forecasting much harder.
Because of the instructional methods, expected class participation, and the nature of the courses vary, no fixed number of absences is applicable to all. situations. Each instructor is responsible for making clear to the class at the beginning of the semester his or her policies and procedures in regard to class, attendance, and the reasons for them. Ice storm is a type of weather. Cold rain falls down into the cold air, changing from water into ice. A heavy ice storm left. More than 100 residents' electricity cut off because the ice storm hit down the wire. What is music? In one sense, this is an easy question. Even the least musical among us can recognize pieces of music when we hear them and name a few canonical examples. We know there are different kinds of music, and even if our knowledge of music is restricted, we know which kinds we like and which kinds we do not. An exhibit that brings together for the first time landscapes painted by French Impressionist peer Auguste Renoir comes to the National Gallery of Canada this June. The gallery in Ottawa worked with the National Gallery of London and the Philadelphia Museum of Art to pull together the collection of 60 Renoir paintings from 45 public and private collections.
The exponential growth of the internet was heralded in the 1990s as revolutionizing the production and dissemination of information. Some people saw the internet as a means of democratizing access to knowledge. For people concerned with African development, it seemed to offer the possibility of leapfrogging over the technology gap that separates Africa from advanced industrialized countries.
The casual observer does not necessarily recognize the skill in how a teacher, for instance, responds to a thoughtful question from a normally quiet student, and how that may be very different from the standard response to a commonly inquisitive or talkative student. Expert teachers are aware of what they are doing. They monitor and adjust their teaching behaviors to bring out the best in their students.
The wind is air moving around. Some winds can move as fast as a racing car over 100 miles per hour. Winds can travel around the world. Wind can make you feel cold because you lose heat from your body faster when it is windy. Weather forecasters need to know the speed and direction of the wind. The strength of wind is measured using the Beaufort scale from wind force when there is no wind to wind force 12, which can damage houses and buildings and is called hurricane force.
English has been changing throughout its lifetime, and it's still changing today. For most of us, these changes are fine as long as they're well and truly in the past. Paradoxically, we can be curious about word origins and the stories behind the structures we find in our language, but we experience a queasy distaste for any change that might be happening right under our noses. There are even language critics who convinced that English is dying, or if not dying, at least being progressively damaged through long years of mistreatment.
One city will start to attract the majority of public or private investment. This could be due to natural advantage or political decisions. This in turn will stimulate further investment due to the multiplier effect and significant rural to urban migration. The investment in this city will be at the expense of other cities.
Omniscience may be a foible of men, but it is not so of books. Knowledge, as Johnson said, is of two kinds. You may know a thing yourself, and you may know where to find it. Now the amount which you may know yourself must, at its best, be limited, but what you may know of the sources of information may, with proper training, become almost boundless. And here come the value and use of reference books, the working of one book in connection with another and applying your intelligence to both. By this means we get as near to that omniscient volume which tells everything as ever we shall get, and although the single volume or work which tells everything does not exist, there is a vast number of reference books in existence, knowledge and proper use of which is essential to every intelligent person. Necessary as I believe reference books to be, they can easily be made to be contributory to idleness, and too mechanical a use should not be made of them.
Roman people had at first been inclined to regard the French Revolution with either indifference or derision, but as the months went by and the emigrants who remained in the city were less and less hopeful of an early return home, the mood of the Romans became increasingly antagonistic towards the assassins of Paris. The nationalization of church property in France, the confiscation of papal territories, the dwindling of contributions, and the paucity of tourists and pilgrims all contributed to an exacerbation of this antagonism. When the French Convention, determined to gain international recognition for the Republic, dispatched envoys to Rome, the people turned upon them in a fury.
Daniel Harris, a scholar of consumption and style, has observed that until photography finally supplanted illustration as the primary means of advertising clothing in the 1950s, glamour inhered less in the face of the drawing, which was by necessity schematic and generalized, than in the sketch's attitude, posture, and gestures, especially in the strangely dainty positions of the hands. Glamour once resided so emphatically in the stance of the model that the faces in the illustrations cannot be said to have expressions at all, but angles or tilts. The chin raised upwards in a haughty look, the eyes lowered in an attitude of introspection, the head cocked at an inquisitive or coquettish angle, or the profile presented in sharp outline, emanating power the severity like an emperor's bust, embossed on a Roman coin. The lightest of any solid element, lithium has, until now, played a modest role in the industry. Silvery in color and softer than lead, it has been used mainly as an alloy of aluminum, a base for automobile grease, and in the production of glass and ceramics. It is so unstable that it is never found in its pure form in nature. Lithium floats on water, or rather, it skitters wildly about, trailing a vapor cloud of hydrogen, until it dissolves.
Why are moths fatally attracted to the light? One solution is the old glib explanation that the moths are trying to use the flame to navigate. This explanation does not tell us, however, why it is that in many species only males are thus attracted and in a few only females. What's more, if moths need to navigate, they must be from a migrating species. Yet most of the time, such moths are not migrating. Indeed, most species do not migrate at all and thus do not need navigation. The stock of Australia's dwellings is evolving, with current homes having more bedrooms on average than homes 10 years ago. At the same time, households are getting smaller on average with decreasing proportions of couple families with children and mainly couple-only and lone-person households. This article examines the changes in household size and the number of bedrooms from 1994-95 to 2003-04. It also looks at the types of households with spare bedrooms and the size of recently purchased new homes compared with existing stock.
Can dogs tell when we are happy, sad, or angry? As a dog owner, I feel confident not only that I can tell what kind of emotional state my pets are in, but also that they respond to my emotions. Yet as a hard-headed scientist, I try to take a more rational and pragmatic view. These personal observations seem more likely to result from my desire for a good relationship with my dogs. Since biological systems with signs of complex engineering are unlikely to have arisen from accidents or coincidences, their organization must come from natural selection and hence should have functions useful for survival and reproduction in the environments in which humans evolved. Chaucer's tales quickly spread throughout England in the early 15th century. Scholars feel the Canterbury Tales reached their instant and continued success because of their accurate and oftentimes vivid portrayal of human nature, unchanged through 600 years since Chaucer's time. George Macy, founder of the Limited Editions Club, wrote on the Canterbury Tales. An important corollary of this focus on language, as the window to legal epistemology, is the central role of discourse to law and other sociocultural processes. In particular, the ideas that people hold about how language works, linguistic ideologies, combine with linguistic structuring to create powerful, often unconscious effects. In recent years, linguistic anthropologists have made much progress in developing more precisely analytic tools for tracking those effects.
Walt Disney World has become a pilgrimage site partly because of the luminosity of its cross-cultural and marketing, and partly because its utopian aspects appeal powerfully to real needs in the capitalist society. Disney's marketing is unique because it captured the symbolic essence of childhood, but the company has gained access to all public shows, comic books, dolls, apparels, and educational film strips all point to the parks and each other. Volcanoes blast more than 100 million tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere every year, but the gas is usually harmless. When a volcano erupts, carbon dioxide spreads out into the atmosphere and isn't concentrated in one spot. But sometimes the gas gets trapped, underground under enormous pressure. If it escapes to the surface in a dense cloud, it can push out oxygen-rich air and become deadly.
The overall result of two or more forces acting on an object is called the resultant force. The resultant of two forces is a single force, which has the same effect as the two forces combined. If two forces pull an object in opposite directions, the size of the resultant can be found by subtracting one force from the other. If the forces are equal, they balance each other. So why is it a concern? It is because radioactivity is invisible and unsensed, and for that reason is perceived as scary. Nevertheless, we understand quite well the radiation levels to which people can be exposed without harm, and those levels are orders of magnitude above the typical background levels.
Steven Pinker, a cognitive psychologist, best known for his book, The Language Instinct, has called music auditory cheesecake, an exquisite confection crafted to tickle the sensitive spots of at least 6 of our mental faculties. If it vanished from our species, he said, the rest of our lifestyle would be virtually unchanged. Others have argued that, on the contrary, music, along with art and literature, is part of what makes people human. Its absence would have a brutalizing effect. Philip Ball, a British science writer and an avid music enthusiast, comes down somewhere in the middle. He says that music is ingrained in our auditory, cognitive, and motor functions. We have a music instinct as much as a language instinct, and could not rid ourselves of it if we tried. For many first-year students, the university may be their first experience living away from home for an extended period. It is a definite break from home. The individual's usual sources of support are no longer present to facilitate adjustment to the unfamiliar environment. In these distant times, the sun was seen to make its daily journey across the sky. At night, the moon appeared. Every new night, the moon waxed or waned a little, and on a few nights, it did not appear at all. At night, the great dome of the heavens was dotted with tiny specks of light. They became known as the stars. It was thought that every star in the heavens had its purpose, and that the secrets of the universe could be discovered by making a study of them. It was well known that there were wandering stars. They appeared in different nightly positions against their neighbors, and they became known as planets. It took centuries, in fact, it took millennia, for man to determine the true nature of these wandering stars and to evolve a model of the world to accommodate them and to predict their positions in the sky. More than simply putting flowers in a container, Ikebana is a disciplined art form in which nature and humanity are brought together. Contrary to the idea of a party-colored or multicolored arrangement of blossoms, Ikebana often emphasizes other areas of the plant, such as its stems and leaves, and emphasizes the shape, line, and form. Though Ikebana is an expression of creativity, certain rules govern its form. The artist's intention behind each arrangement is shown through a piece's color. Combinations, natural shapes, graceful lines, and the implied meaning of the arrangement.
In geologic terms, a plate is a large, rigid slab of solid rock. The word tectonics comes from the Greek, root to build. Putting these two words together, we get the term plate tectonics, which refers to how the Earth's surface is built of plates. The theory of plate tectonics states that the Earth's outermost layer is fragmented into a dozen or larger and small plates that are moving relative to one another.
How is plagiarism detected? It is usually easy for lecturers to identify plagiarism within students' work. The university also actively investigates plagiarism in students' assessed work through electronic detection software called Turnitin. This software compares students' work against text on the internet in journal articles and within previously submitted work from LSBU and other institutions and highlights any matches it finds.
You can study anywhere. Obviously, some places are better than others. Libraries, study lounges, or private rooms are best. Above all, the place you choose to study should not be distracting. Distractions can build up, and the first thing you know, you're out of time and out of luck. Make choosing a good physical environment a part of your study habits.
Sportswomen's records are important and need to be preserved. And if the paper records don't exist, we need to get out and start interviewing people, not to put too fine a point on it while we still have a chance. After all, if the records aren't kept in some form or another, then the stories are lost too.
Shakespeare produced most of his known work between 1590 and 1613. His early plays were mainly comedies and histories, genres he raised to the peak of sophistication and artistry by the end of the 16th century. Next, he wrote mainly tragedies until about 1608, including Hamlet, King Lear, and Macbeth, considered some of the finest examples in the English language. In his last phase, he wrote tragicomedies, also known as romances, and collaborated with other playwrights.
First, new ideas are the wheels of progress. Without them, stagnation reigns. Whether you're a designer dreaming of another world, an engineer working on a new kind of structure, an executive charged with developing a fresh business concept, an advertiser seeking a breakthrough way to sell your product, a fifth-grade teacher trying to plan a memorable school, assembly program, or a volunteer looking for a new way to sell the same old raffle tickets, your ability to generate good ideas is critical to your success.
Over the years, to increase trade, many countries have created free trade agreements with other countries. Under the framework of General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade and World Trade Organization, countries opened up their borders and agreed to remove trade barriers, which saw the emergence of international trade and expanded economic globalization. For example, in 1994, the United States, Mexico, and Canada signed the North American Free Trade Agreement (NAFTA), which ultimately removed all tariffs on trade goods between the three nations. This allowed globalization of goods and services as well as people and ideas between these three countries.
To invest, you need to draw up a clear plan, do your own research, build in a margin of safety by always thinking about the valuation, and ultimately be patient. By all means, include some speculative picks if you wish, but ensure they are only a small part of your portfolio. Looking for an oil explorer whose shares double, treble, and double again is exciting, but such firms are very rare. There are a lot more which have a consistent record of paying out the dividends, which really make the markets work for you once they are reinvested.
Participating regularly in physical activity has been shown to benefit an individual's health and well-being. Regular physical activity is important in reducing the risk of chronic diseases such as heart disease and stroke, obesity, diabetes, and some forms of cancer. The National Physical Activity Guidelines for Adults recommend at least 30 minutes of moderate-intensity physical activity, preferably every day of the week, to obtain health benefits.
Some students say that they need complete quiet to read and study. Others study best in a crowded, noisy room because the noise actually helps them concentrate. Some students like quiet music playing. Others do not. The point is, you should know the level of noise that is optimal for your own studying. However, one general rule for all students is that the television seems to be more of a distraction than music or other background noise. So, leave the TV off when you are reading or studying. Also, don't let yourself become distracted by computer games, email, or internet surfing. Life in the UK 2012 provides a unique overview of well-being in the UK today. The report is the first snapshot of life in the UK to be delivered by the Measuring National Wellbeing Programme and will be updated and published annually. Well-being is discussed in terms of the economy, people, and the environment. Information such as the unemployment rate or number of crimes against the person are presented alongside data on people's thoughts and feelings. For example, satisfaction with our jobs or leisure time and fear of crime. Together, a richer picture on how society is doing is provided. Elements of both the psychoanalytic and behaviorist theories arrange in modern approaches to personality. Advances in neuroscience have begun to bridge the gap between biochemistry and behavior, but there is still a great deal that needs to be explained. Without a consistent understanding of personality, how can we begin to categorize risk takers? If we cannot, we will be unable to compare their genes with those of others. The American People. Creating a Nation and a Society, concise edition, examines U.S. history as revealed through the experiences of diverse Americans, both ordinary and extraordinary. With a thought-provoking and rich presentation, the authors explore the complex lives of Americans of all national origins and cultural backgrounds at all levels of society and in all regions of the country. On average, Iceland experiences a major volcanic event once every 5 years. Since the Middle Ages, a third of all the lava that has covered the Earth's surface has erupted in Iceland. However, according to a recent geological hypothesis, this estimate does not include submarine eruptions, which are much more extensive than those on the land surface. Fingerprints, referred to as finger marks in forensics, are formed when residue from the ridged skin of the fingers or palms is transferred onto a surface, leaving behind an impression. Finger marks are often made of sweat and colorless, contaminating materials such as soap, moisturizer, and grease. These finger marks are described as latent as they are generally invisible to the naked eye, which means that locating them at a crime scene can be challenging. Mathematics and statistics play a part in almost all daily activities. They are at the heart of advances in science and technology, as well as providing indispensable problem-solving and decision-making tools in many areas of life. They underpin the rigorous analysis and modeling required for new policies, designs, and systems. Mathematical and statistical knowledge is much sought after by employers for a wide variety of jobs, not least in teaching the subject, and a qualification in any one of the areas we offer can bring real benefits in your professional life. By 2025, government experts say America's skies will swarm with 3 times as many planes, and not just the kind of traffic flying today. There will be thousands of tiny jets, seating 6 or fewer at airliner altitudes, competing for space with remotely operated drones that need help avoiding mid-air collisions, and with commercially operated rockets carrying satellites and tourists into space. Folklore is a modern term for the body of traditional customs, superstitions, stories, dances, and songs that have been adopted and maintained within a given community by processes of repetition not reliant on the written word. Along with folk songs and folktales, this broad category of cultural forms embraces all kinds of legends, riddles, jokes, proverbs, games, charms, omens, spells, and rituals, especially those of pre-literate societies or social classes. Those forms of verbal expression that are handed on from one generation or locality to the next by word of mouth are said to constitute an oral tradition.
What is a country and how is a country defined? When people ask how many countries there are in the world, they expect a simple answer. After all, we've explored the whole planet. We have international travel, satellite navigation, and plenty of global organizations like the United Nations, so we should really know how many countries there are. However, the answer to the question varies according to whom you ask. Most people say there are 192 countries, but others point out that there could be more, like 260 of them. So why isn't there a straightforward answer? The problem arises because there isn't a universally agreed definition of country, and because, for political reasons, some countries find it convenient to recognize or not recognize other countries.
Researchers already know that spending long periods of time in a zero-gravity environment, such as that inside the International Space Station, ISS, results in loss of bone density and damage to the body's muscles. That's partly why stays aboard the ISS are capped at 6 months. And now, a number of NASA astronauts are reporting that their 2020 vision faded after spending time in space, with many needing glasses once they return to Earth. In the fast-changing world of modern healthcare, the job of a doctor is more and more like the job of chief executive. The people who run hospitals and physicians' practices don't just need to know medicine, they must also be able to balance budgets, motivate a large and diverse staff, and make difficult marketing and legal decisions.